Hi! Welcome to this part of my review featuring the Goblin Slayer TRPG. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review featuring this role-playing game based on the popular fantasy series, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about damage. But before that, I would like to talk about this channel's sponsor, Heroes and Hardships. This is a universal RPG system allowing you to play any sort of genre, campaign, story, adventure. You can also create any sort of character imaginable. You have hundreds of tools to assist you with that. I'm going to put a few links in the description that will take you to the Kickstarter that should begin in about a month or so. You will also find links to the website, to the Tetsubo section of the website, which is an upcoming setting for Heroes and Hardships, inspired by Japan's Sengoku era. You will also find links to the Discord and to my reviews of the Quickstart guide and the Wallace campaign setting, based on the life and exploits of William Wallace, so please check it out. Now, let's continue. During combat, when a weapon attack lands or an attack spell is used, player characters deal damage to their opponents. Obviously, player characters can take damage as well when they are unable to defend against an enemy attack, their defense isn't enough, or when being struck by a spell. Each spell and weapon lists its appropriate damage value. The total damage is the calculated damage. Let's talk about calculating damage from weapons. Every weapon has a power such as 1d6 plus 1 or 2d6 plus 2. When an attack with a weapon lands, you calculate the damage using the following formula, which is weapon attack damage equals weapon power plus the level of the class using the weapon plus bonus from hit check effectiveness score. The hit check's effectiveness score is the hit check's total score plus any equipment effects the weapon has, and any other bonuses or penalties from skills. You have a table to determine this extra damage. For example, if you roll 15 to 19, you get a plus 1d6 to your damage. But what if you roll 25 to 29? Then you get plus 3 6-sided dice to your damage. Some spells deal damage to a target. As a general rule, these spells are classified as attack spells. The damage a spell does to an enemy can be calculated using the following formula, which is spell damage equals spell power plus other bonuses. However, a spell's power changes depending on the spell use check's effectiveness score and the spellcaster's class level. The spell use check's effectiveness score is its total check score, plus bonuses or penalties from any equipment, items used, or skills. Each spell has an effect table that shows the variation in effects depending on the effectiveness score. When calculating a spell's power, you need to see the individual description for that spell. Let's talk about damage attributes. Most damage is linked to an attribute. For example, weapons can deal damage of either the slash, pierce, or bludgeoning attribute. Which one it is depends on the weapon being used for the attack. Spell damage also has attributes: earth, water, fire, and wind. Other kinds of damage may have these attributes too. Falling damage is bludgeoning, and if you jump into some blazing flames, you will naturally take fire damage. If you are poisoned, you may take poison attribute damage. However, there are some types of damage that have no attribute at all. Each weapon, spell, and item listed in this book will have an attribute for its damage, so you need to see their individual descriptions. If you receive a kind of damage not described in this book, the game master should decide what attribute it is. Sometimes you will deal damage to 2 or more opponents at once with spells that affect an area or by attacks from the mow down skill. In these cases, determine the damage for each target you deal damage to individually. Let's talk about reducing damage. All damage, whether it's from weapons or spells, can be reduced by the character's armor score. Keep in mind that some spells and monster special abilities specify that this damage cannot be reduced by armor score. When this phrase appears, give it priority over this section. A character's armor score is determined by the armor they have equipped. When a character passes a block check, they add the block score of the shield they have equipped to their armor score. When it comes to applied damage and fatigue, the damage a character actually takes is called applied damage. This can be calculated using the following formula. Applied damage equals damage from weapon, attack, or spell minus the armor value plus the block value. Applied damage can never be less than 0 in any circumstance. If you get a negative value for applied damage using the above formula, treat it as 0. After that, you add the applied damage to the character's wound count. You write the value in the wounds section of your adventure sheet. If something is already written there, add the new value to it for the current total. If this results in the character's wound count equaling or exceeding their life force, they will start gaining 1 point of fatigue for every check on the attrition track. If a spiked bubble is checked off in the attrition track at the end of the round, the character gains 2 points of fatigue instead of 1. If the character's wound count ever equals or exceeds twice their life force, they die. When it comes to reducing damage from spells can be reduced by passing a spell resistance check. In most cases, when the spell resistance check succeeds, the spell's effects will either disappear or be halved. However, there are certain spells that characters cannot make a spell resistance check against. When reducing spell damage with the character's armor score, first, reduce the spell's effects with a past spell resistance check, then subtract the armor score from that. Besides all of that, there are other sources of damage, such as falling damage, suffering fatigue from suffocation, fatigue from not sleeping or eating, etc. There are some ways in which the character can mitigate this damage. For example, you can make an acrobatics check to reduce the damage from a fall. Or if you want to hold your breath if you are in a situation of suffocation, then you need to make a strength resistance check to hold your breath longer. It's also important to remember that monsters do not suffer fatigue. If they are attacked with some sort of fatigue effect, they take normal damage instead. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part we are going to talk about recovery. So the system is pretty easy to understand when it comes to taking damage or fatigue. And I like how it's somewhat realistic in the sense that if a huge foe or a very powerful enemy attacks you and you catch that attack with your shield, if the damage is too much, it will still bypass your protection and inflict damage upon your body. This is quite realistic in many tabletop role-playing games. When you stop something using your shield, that's it. And they do not reflect or represent the numbness or the pain that you suffer in your arm when you are receiving the blow from an axe or a mace or a giant fist or the tail of a dragon or something. And because of the escalating fatigue, this turns out into a surprisingly gritty system. It has the trappings of high fantasy, but situations will become quite dire if you do not take those things into consideration. Thank you for watching this part of the review, and thank you for your likes and your comments. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.